Hello, my name is Stix and I'm a member of Brit Modeler, which is a website dedicated to the building of kits and models. My username there is PlaStix. I frequently post a progress of my kit building and then display the photos of the finished models. When I post my models, I sometimes get asked how I achieve the finish I do using only brushes. I don't actually own an airbrush as I don't have anywhere suitable to use one, and in fact I actually enjoy the process of painting with brushes. All the models on screen in this beginning section have been initially painted with flat brushes and then had the detail painting and weathering done with a variety of other types of brush. So my intention with this video is to share some of the techniques I use to achieve the finish I do without an airbrush. In the first part, I'm going to show how I use flat brushes to get the initial coats of paint on. This kit is the one I'm going to use to show what I do, and these are the brushes that I'm going to use. There are many other types available from other manufacturers. Okay, so I'm going to make a start. I've made sure that my paint is really well stirred. I don't know if you can see, this is my battered old plate that I've been using for years now. That's not a pattern around the outside, that's all paint and glue. I've got a tiny amount of water on that side, and you'll notice that I've got it on my mat but it's leaning away so the water stays that end. I'm going to use some paint out of here. I'm using Revell's Dark Earth. It seems a suitable match. I'm going to get a reasonable amount of paint out. I'm going to mix it on that bit until I get to what I think is a suitable consistency. I'm going to start work on the lower hull. Luckily this has got plenty of stuff inside to hold, so I can hold on to those parts while I'm painting. I'm trying to get a consistency on the plate that I think looks like it should work on the model, and then very carefully I'm going to try and see how it goes on. You'll see that I work reasonably quickly, and as long as it doesn't pull off the surface, which it doesn't seem to be at the moment, I'm going for a very thin coat to start with. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but it is very thin. It seems very washy, but that's on purpose because I want it really to be, all the detail to stay in place. If I take it out of screenshot occasionally, I'm sorry, I'm picking it up higher than I intended, but we'll see how this goes on. And then I'll try and do some more where you can see what's happening. There's some patches in amongst what I've been doing, so I'm going to just go around it a little bit more. And I'm going to say, you can see I'm not trying to do this slowly. I'll show you, I'll try and get some light on it so you can see that it is going on quite nice and flat. And I say, as you look at it, you kind of have to spot where there's any missing. And again, this is where I'm dry brushing back over it. I can see where the wetter parts are, and I'm trying to get them just to blend in a bit. And you can see I go in different directions. I think that's another thing that I was making the mistake of doing when I first painted with brushes. I tried to keep all the paintwork going in one direction, and that's, I think, where you can end up with the streaks in the paint. You can see I'm working it quite hard into the detail on the back, because the back end of it has got a little bit more. At the bottom is quite flat, so there's not much on there, but I'm trying to, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but there are some panel lines on the back there that I'm trying to make sure the paint's into. You can see it's pulling a little bit round these supports at the back, so I'm going to work in around them. Now I'm going to say, while that's starting to dry, it's no good me keep going over it too much. I'm going to head back towards the front and just have a look and see if I've covered it. It does look generally, and that's a really nice coat of paint actually, and that's down more to the paint. I have to say I like this paint. Sometimes I found these days that when I buy paint, some of it, when you open it, it's got like an oily substance on the top. I find those really difficult to work with. The oil seems to make it so that you get very streaky paint, and I've bought, it seems to be more in the, I'm not knocking them because I've some brilliant colours, but in the Humbrol ones they seem to have changed the formula a little bit. I don't know exactly what they've done, but the result is it makes it quite hard to work with. And I've started making a note of obviously the batch numbers from the paint, and then trying to get more of the batch numbers that work and not bothering so much. Now you can see what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to work my brush inside these vents and around these, because there is a little bit of pooling going on around these things. It's not a problem. This is kind of usual for what I do. See now, it's perhaps a little bit streaky on the bottom. I don't know if it'll pick up. Most places it looks all right. I think it's gone around the detail quite nicely. A little bit there. Also, I'm going to say part of the thing I've got the problem with is there are lots of ejection pin marks over this, and I have taken them off, but part of the problem is because it's mostly going to be hidden, I didn't do perhaps the neatest job with removing the scratch marks that resulted, and I can see that showing through, so hopefully that won't be a problem later on. But well, it looks alright. I'm going to put it down that way and I'll have a go at doing the detail on this one. I do find that I'm picking it up quite high. I'll try not to do that so much. So I do use these paints very thin down. That's perhaps a bit too thin at the moment, but the idea is to get a covering all over the model. Perhaps I should have said in the first bit that I do follow the advice of washing the kit in soapy water, warm soapy water, before I start painting, or before I start building even. I think that's to get rid of any mould release agents off it. And hopefully this is why the surface isn't greasy and it takes to water-based paints quite nicely. There's some really nice detail on this kit that I'd like to leave intact. So I'm going to just work quite quickly. Just bear with me, I'm just going to have a quick look what I've been doing. Yeah, that's okay. As I say, I try not to work in just one direction, especially around the quite nice detail that's on the kit here. So I'm getting it on and working relatively quickly again. As I say, this is the first time I've done a video like this. This may not be ideal. If it doesn't work properly, I'll still use it to demonstrate what I do initially. But you can see there's some, I don't know if you'll be able to see it there, there's some grating on the back here. So I want that to make sure that I can dry brush. I'm going to put a probably an anthracite wash into the where the grills are. And then dry brush over the surface. And I say, if this video works, I'll do a whole set for this kit and just show the different things I do, because I don't have an airbrush. I'm trying, I mean, I don't want to see, I'm not knocking airbrushes. I'm going to say literally I don't have anywhere to use one. I think I'd be slightly nervous of using them. Just bear with me, I just need to look at the detail I'm doing. I don't particularly want to duck down into view. And it seems to be good. I do like this paint, seems quite nice, I have to say. You can kind of judge how it's going to apply to the model, how it's going over the plate, and that's how I use it to judge what I'm doing. Now you can see on here, at the moment I'm holding it by this side here. When I get towards the end, obviously I don't want to get fingerprints in the paint, so I've left a little bit of sprue on the end, which will hopefully give me something to hold. I'm just going to go, I can see some bits that I've missed on this back area. But you have to be, if you do decide to try this thing, this painting, you have to be prepared that it's not going to look like a final coat on this go. This is literally just to get it covered with a layer of acrylic paint so that I can do the next layer, which will be thin again, but it'll start and build up the colour better. At this point all I want it to be is just covered and quite thinly, so all the detail is still in place. I think that's going alright. There's some bits back here I can see are still shiny plastic, so I need to go over those. It's very difficult working out which way I'm holding it to make sure you can see what I'm doing, which is something I'll have to practice. Use the sprue a bit more now. So I try to go in lots of different directions, so I make sure I'm catching all the detail and there's no paint pooling anywhere. Paint's going a bit thick at this, and one thing I find about Revolve paints is they go thick as long as you mix them again quite quickly. They do revive quite nicely. I don't know what the term should be really, but it's like dry brushing, but it's the brush is still slightly wet. Over brushing, I don't know. Anyway, the idea is making sure there's nothing left in any. There's quite a few sunken areas on the surface. I'm just trying to make sure that if there's any paint in them, it's not going to just end up being stuck at the bottom of them and drying a lump. Yeah, again, because the paint's so thin, and it's almost dried already in most places. If I do spot areas, I can introduce more paint over the top. fix the grills on the back. So I actually enjoy this process. It's better when it's going well, which fortunately with this Revell paint it seems to be at the moment. Hold it. That's always one of the things, seeing how you can find ways to hold it so you can get at different bits and not remove the paint that you've put on already. See, I've got a little bit, some areas around this front bit that aren't quite covered as well. I think most areas on top are done. Work it in amongst some of the detail there. Alright, that's not too bad. So that's got a cover of paint on. I think it's alright. Hopefully you can see what it looks like. I need to mix some more now, I think. Some more out of there. And I want it quite thinned. And on the whole, on the turret, I tend to hold them on the inside like that. I'll make a start on the base, see how the paint is. I meant to say early on that I've decided not to go with the biggest flat brush in the set. I went for one size down because it's not a huge kit, being 148. I've got a lot of areas to cover and there aren't a lot of flat areas. Flat areas can be, plain flat areas can be hard, like the bottom part of the hull. They can be more difficult sometimes because obviously you do tend to notice the any thinned areas or streaked areas. They tend to show up more on plain surfaces. You have this tendency to want to keep picking it up, and I'm not going to be able to show what I'm doing if I do that. So now I've got to work it in some of the detail on this because there's some sunken detail which I decided not to paint beforehand. I thought this would be slow the process of getting the turret done, and I wanted to make sure I could do this video this week. I do apologise if I'm rambling. As I say, please feel free to skip forward at any point or turn it off. But well, we'll see how it's going. Work it into the, say, where the smoke launchers are. It's quite recessed. There's some detail on the turret that's been added, like the hatches. So I need to get the paint in and amongst around those. So I just have to make sure, like round here, I'm going underneath wherever there might be an area. something I always used to worry about was getting the correct colour when you paint. So this obviously doesn't look like it's finally going to look, because you can still see through it in real terms to the colour of the plastic below. But and by the time I've done dry brushing over it and put washers on, the colour will be quite different. Just trying to make sure I get my brush work down into any recessed areas, because it's quite easy to miss them. Probably going to be the most boring video ever, but I'll give it a go for the first one, and then if it doesn't work, I'll either give up or have another go. But they seem like a suitable tank, is going to say, because of the really nice surface detail. It should, because of what I normally do to any kit that I build. I do tend to have a kind of routine of things that I do. I can show what I've done and then do it better on the next one, maybe. Right, I think that's about all I'm going to risk doing on a couple of bits I can see I've missed. It's a problem because I'm painting at a slightly different angle. I tend to paint normally up very close to my face, because I am so short-sighted that I am spotting that I'm missing stuff here and there. One thing I should have mentioned actually is that what I tend to do is try and work out what sub-assemblies I can build and paint before putting everything together, so that I try, if the tools have got to go on, I think there's only one on this one, but if the tools have got to go on, I don't tend to, because I brush paint, I don't tend to attach those until I've done all the painting and all the weathering, and I'll paint those up separately and then attach them afterwards. Which I know is a little bit different here. A lot of people that build tanks tend to put everything in place and then paint it together. I must admit I'd find that quite difficult, so perhaps I'm lucky not having an airbrush in that way, because I like the idea of painting all the details separately. I can do the different bits of weathering on the tools that I need to do. Right, I think that's where I'm going to stop on that one. Most areas seem to have paint on. So that should be suitable for the second coat, which I'll do in a separate video. That's another one. Oh, sorry, I didn't show that one, but hopefully, I don't know the optimal place to hold these yet to show the detail, but that seems like a reasonable coat at the moment. Seems to be over everything. Hasn't obliterated the detail. Now, I'm not going to paint all the different bits and pieces I've got here, but this is the kind of thing that I do. I separate bits off so that I've got smaller parts, like in this case the wheels. I can paint these separately now. They're held still by one little bit on the sprue. I know that people who spray paint tend to stick them up through a cocktail stick or something up through and then just spray them. I don't find that tends to work so well because I'm brushing. I tend to knock them off the cocktail stick more because you kind of have to handle them, so I tend to leave them where I can on the sprue so I can do that. And the same with the suspension arms, they're separate. I've separated off a load of bits and pieces. I'm not going to get them all out, but So these are all separate and ready to be painted. As I say, some of them are going to be the same colour as these others. So when I'm doing the wheels, for example, if I do these and I'll do that one set of suspension arms, I'm obviously not going to do all of them on video. I think that would be more boring than it already is probably. But so again, I'm just going to get some. Oh, I'll move those out of the way so I don't splash them. Same kind of thing. I just use the paint fairly thinned again over everything fairly quickly because the paint is so thin. It goes on quite quickly. And I shall keep working over these. I paint everything, including the tyres on wheels where there's going to be tyres, so that I can then go over those at a later point. I'll do the tyres separately when everything's dry. I will show, if this works, I'll show how I paint tyres and things. Nobody's going to watch this one anyway, but we'll see. So all I'm doing is just making sure everything on the surface has got paint on. I'm trying to work it using the brush onto the detail. There's no real finesse at this point, it's just a case of getting the paint on. Yeah, it's just nice paint this. It's bear with me, I just need to have a quick look. Yeah, that's alright. Yes, this is a little bit odd for me because I am painting a lot further away from me, so hopefully it'll look alright in the end. Again, there's some lovely detail on these parts, I do like this. Okay, so let's try and get some light on it, and hopefully you can see there, that's quite a nice even coat on those. Same kind of thing with these. Yeah, ideally I want to try and get the suspension and the wheels and stuff done so I can get the lower parts done. I've actually done the upper hull stuff kind of out of sequence for me. I often build up the lower hull and get the track on and everything before doing anything to do with the upper hull, but I figured, being as I was doing this as a demonstration of what I do, I'd like to point out again that this is just a demonstration of what I do. I'm not doing it as a tutorial. There's some fantastic proper tutorials out there. I suggest you hunt over YouTube if you want to learn how to do this properly. I'm just demonstrating, in this case, what I do to get the paint on in the way that I do. So that's, and I say roughly, if I move these over, this is roughly what I do when I'm painting my kits. These are just about dry. They are dry now. You can see they're quite nicely. Okay, it's a nice paint. Seems to have gone on well. So I'm going to carry on painting all these brown bits, dark earth bits, and get them all done, but off camera. But it'll just be the basic same way. I'll just paint them where they are, and then I'll start putting a second coat on of it later, and I'll film that just to show how I put the second coat on, which isn't any different really, but you'll see how that goes on as well. And then I'll paint some of the smaller bits. I've got things like track work prepared, so you can see where I've got left some sprue on so I can hold that while I'm painting, and I'll do some of those just to show how I paint track. But hopefully that's the first bit done. We'll see how that looks in a second. So if you haven't fallen asleep yet with boredom, these photos show the results of the painting just seen. The Revell paint I used worked really well, and all these parts look ready now for their second coat. The photo after this one is to show there is some paint on. I realised in the video it's a bit difficult to tell. The set on the right are the ones that are unpainted. Later on I managed to get all the parts needed to be dark earth painted as well. Right, in this bit I'm going to concentrate on doing the second coat onto the parts that I did in the last bit of the video. You've probably seen the photos if you have been watching. This is the result of last time's initial coat of paint that I put on. Hopefully you can see it. You can probably see I've changed the angle a little bit on the camera now, and I'm going to try and do things a little bit more closer into the camera. I'll move that one out of the way. The detail stayed in place quite nicely, I think. I'll start with that one. Those are the wheels. I've got my paint mixed exactly the same as I had before. I've moved it round a little bit, so I'm going to work a little bit differently so you can hopefully see a bit more what I'm doing with the paint. Again, I'm going to start in exactly the same place as I did last time. Just at the front on these paints, very thin. Trying to work it down into the various bits of mesh work on the grills. As I say, this isn't necessarily the technique for everybody. If you can get yourself an airbrush and you've got space to use one, then probably that's the way to move forward. I find that this process works for me. Again, as I kept repeating in the last bit, and I do apologise for the bits where I've been repeating myself. I think I'm lucky with this paint this time. Sometimes it's been harder to get the paint on for the one I'm doing with the video. This is quite nice to be able to show because it is going on really nicely at the moment. You can, might be quite difficult to see the difference, but it is seems to, well, to me it seems to be building up quite nicely. I could see some slight patchy bits before I started and they seem to be disappearing at the moment. Don't know how much of an effect it's going to have, but it's the weather is slightly different outside where I'm painting at the moment. Seems to be going from snowing a bit to very bright sunshine, so that may have the lighting quality may change while I'm doing these bits. Earlier when I was getting organised, it was just throwing it down with snow, but that seems to be letting up a bit at the moment. Say, like last time, I've got the paint on my plate. It's quite thinned down at the moment, as you can probably see. I have moved the plate to a different location while I'm doing this bit, because, as I say, I'm hoping, because obviously when I reviewed what I've done, and I have edited it, because I ended up with close to an hour's worth of video, which was certainly not going to keep people entertained, so I have edited it down to about 30 minutes so far, and I'll say I don't think these will be long bits that I'm doing the second coat, because these do tend to be slightly quicker, so I'm hoping it's not overly long. Especially over things like the meshwork in the grills. I do try to make sure the paint is very, very thin when it's going into those, because I don't want any of it clogging up. Keep an eye on it as it dries. Trying to spot again, as I did in the first part anywhere, where it looks like I might have missed some. There's lots of little bits of detail that I'm trying to make sure it goes down into. Don't know if you can see that. I don't still know where the best angles are to hold these, but it seems to be drying quite nicely around the grills. Nothing's pulled in any one of them particularly, which is always my worry. You end up with a couple of patchy bits. But I realised when I was looking at the detail on this, there's other grills all over the place. It's going to hopefully show up quite nicely under the dry brushing and washes. That'll do. Let's find somewhere to hold this, because I don't know if it'll show up, but there's a little bit of a thicker bit on this front bit, which I'm going to just try and smooth out. I think it's because I've started here and it's dried. Just make sure I've got down into those light fittings again. just about it. So again, I'm not awfully sure how edit if it doesn't look too good, but I think that's another decent coat. So again, what I'll do is I'll pause just a second and just check how this looks. I think that bit where it was, again, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but the bit I was just doing looks a little bit better now. Again, in the long run, there's, I'm going to put anthracite over these, and they're going to be dry brushed and have washers on, so I'm not awfully worried if there's a couple of imperfections in the surface at this point. And that's one of the beauties of doing tanks, really, is that you can get lots of mud and stowage and other bits and pieces to hide any major flaws. I think doing aircraft is slightly trickier. Again, I paint aircraft in exactly the same way as this. There's nothing different about what I do. Right, let's just have a quick look. Seems alright. Right, do a quick bit on this side. Looks to be, to me, a few little streaks on this side, so I'm just going to go over it a little bit. See what it looks like after that. Let's just check the other side. This one doesn't seem to have the same degree of marks on it, so that should be alright. I think this is the thing, yeah, it's on the flatter areas, like the side panels here and the side armour and the skirts. It looks, it's more noticeable if you've got any streaking in your paint on those areas than it is on surfaces like this where you've got lots of detail, because the shadows of the parts tend to hide any problems. It's looking a bit better anyway. Just make sure it's dried out. To stop on that one. Hopefully, again, I don't quite know the best angle to show it. I'll stop there, and then I'll come back and do the turret and the wheels. Okay, same again with the turret. I'm going to make a start on giving a second coat. This is how it ended up last time. Hold it in exactly the same way. I won't show everything on this one, so you've probably got an idea from the upper hull. I'm going to start on the underneath. Again, very thin paint. we see how thin the paint is again. It will build up slowly. I'll have to decide after doing this if I put another one on. I don't think I will. I think I was reasonably happy with the first coat. Hopefully a second coat will look okay, and then I can start the various washes. And dry brushing to pull out the detail. Pretty reasonable. So that's that one. I'll put that off to one side, and then exactly the same way I'm going to just get the next coat onto these. Matter of making it very thin, and again I shall work quite quickly. Into all the areas. Anyway, I think looks like a reasonable coat of paint on the wheels. A little bit tucked into places. I'll sort that out afterwards though. At the moment that's, I think, looking okay. Hopefully you can see that. So the next step I'll do is I'll take a few photographs of these. I'll paint up all the other parts with a second coat of paint as well. Take some photographs of those, and then hopefully if this one works, I'll make another video and I'll show how I'll put the washers on. The photos on screen at the moment show the results of me painting the second coat of Revell's Dark Earth. As I have mentioned, I am really pleased with this paint, and having looked at the results, I am not going to do a third coat. Instead, I will move on to the washers and dry brushing stages. After I got all the painting done in the photographs that you can see here, I went on and started work on the parts which are either going to be metallic or the commander figure. I paint all these parts initially with anthracite. I didn't get a chance to do any filming while I was painting the anthracite, but it did go on reasonably well, and I was quite happy, as you can see in the photographs which are on screen now. These images here show that all the parts have now had 2 coats of paint and are ready for the next stages. I will try and clear some space on my iPad and then film what I do. If you have been watching, thank you very much for your time.